telling somebody that, you should HODL for 10 years, it is so simple, but it is not easy. It is a very difficult thing to do, and you're going to have to steal your resolve every single day. It's like a meditative practice. You wake up and you go, I just lost that much money. I just gained that much money, right? And it actually gets harder as you go up, as you start to be right and you start winning. Don't wait to buy Bitcoin and wait, because it's like, over time, this thing is glacial. Bitcoin is sort of an infinite container for wealth, and the world is looking for an infinite container for wealth, right? When you're bearish on the markets, you get to be right. This is true, because bad things always do happen in life. You're going to be right. The pessimist will always be right. But the optimist get to be rich. We get to be rich. So I'm going to keep remaining bullish for a while. You know what I mean? Can't take my bullish spirit away from me. If you believe Bitcoin's never going to 100K, this is you. This is you. Okay? I want you to know that about yourself.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like and comment below. And to find future episodes in your feed and push notifications, make sure you subscribe. And if you click the little bell, you'll get every new episode as it's released. Thanks again for watching. Hey guys, I'm going to take a quick pause to introduce the first sponsor on the Jay Gould Show. I am happy and proud to say that this show is now sponsored by Withum Smith & Brown, which is a forward-thinking, technology-driven advisory and accounting firm that is committed to helping big and small companies be more profitable, efficient, and productive in today's complex business environment. Withum now also has a dedicated crypto and blockchain technology team to help early-stage businesses properly navigate all the crypto tax-related matters. I've been using Withum both personally and professionally for nearly a decade for all of my business's personal needs as well. I'm very happy with them and I highly recommend Withum. You can contact Withum by visiting their website at withum.com. Now back to the show. Today I'm sitting down with the one and only American HODL. He needs no introduction, so here we go. American HODL.
Hey friends, let's talk about Bitcoin.
Let's go. So today we're just going to talk about 2021 in review and going into 2022, what we expect. So let's rock and roll. First thing is, HODL, from your perspective, 2021, tell me what surprised you the most.
Well, I mean, all right. So number one, I don't know what I've said on this show, but I know what I've said in the past. And I think it's time. I have to eat some humble pie here, because my predictions were much higher than where we are going to end the year, right? Like what is it, the 22nd? Unless we can go from $48,000 to $300,000 in 6 days or 7 days or something, I don't think it's in the cards for me. So I made a bet that's like famous in the Bitcoin community for with Peter McCormick, and I'm gonna have to pay that limey fuck half a Bitcoin, which is very unfortunate. Because I took the over. I always take the bullish side of the bet, but I took the over on 300K. He took the under on 300K. It definitely looks like we're going to be under 300K. So I think for me, it's been, reevaluating some of my theses surrounding this asset class and this investment. And, I was one of the guys who was here early, in my 20s, like post-college. And that's a lot of the early guys who were in Bitcoin. We're all kind of the same type of person. We have some libertarian leanings, maybe we were really interested in the great financial crisis, and then we went sort of followed Ron Paul for a while, and then you end up in Bitcoin. And that's sort of the trajectory that a lot of people had. And, back then it was all really low stakes, and it was very, it was internal. The system was internal. It didn't live in the world the way it does now. I mean, now it's a $1 trillion asset class, and it lives in the world, and it gets pushed around by macro forces. And I don't think that that's something that we as the early Bitcoiners, the early adopters, really have understood fully. I know I didn't understand it fully. And so now I've been just digging in on the macro side, trying to understand what the macro guys are talking about, more in depth. I mean, we always talk about macro here and there, but, we were the young Bitcoin kids, and we had our own internal code for how things work and operate. And, the game done changed, basically. Like the whole thing is different now. And I'm trying to figure out, it's always evolving. So I'm trying to figure out the new game and just destroy any, preconceptions I might have had and go back to the drawing board and say, okay, like why, for instance, I would have never expected the Bitcoin price to be $48,000 closing out the year. So like, why is that happening? And I think you can come to a lot of conclusions. Like you can talk about the futures ETF. I think that's part of the story. I think the China mining ban is part of the story. I think that absolutely destroyed price action for like 6 months, right in the middle of what was supposed to be a great year for Bitcoin in terms of price appreciation. I think you got, now that Bitcoin lives in the world, there's mounting sort of concern for how it will interoperate with the traditional financial system, and you've seen a lot of that out of Congress and the Senate and the executive branch and Treasury and the Fed. And actually, the Fed seems to not be worried, but everybody else seems to have some concerns, especially around stablecoins and commercial paper and what's backing this, what's backing that, how does this interoperate, et cetera, right? So just to sum it all up, at the end of 2021, I'm feeling very much like everything I thought I knew was wrong. And now I'm going back to the drawing board and saying, okay, what's next? Like, where are we heading from here? Because we're playing a new game now. And I had discounted that until reality smacked me in the face.
All right, cool, bro. So let's talk about the Fed for a second, and let's talk about the Federal Reserve tightening recently. I've been talking about this, as you know, on Clubhouse all year, and I got yelled and smacked around from everybody. The Fed can't raise rates; it's never going to happen. They can't do anything. I was like, of course they will. This is what they do. And Tina was most vocal with me. We've talked privately on calls about it and stuff. He's kind of capitulated a little bit, in my opinion.
I think he's come around to your opinion. I think he's capitulated.
Yeah, I think so.
He keeps saying he's worried about the Fed, worried about what
now he's worried. Yeah, and I was saying it all year. I was like, I think that they're going to do this because they're not. I don't think they're doing it for Bitcoin. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin, right? Just their playbook. This is their playbook, right? Yeah. Their playbook is let's try to get our interest rates up high, so that if and when we need to, we can. That's a tool. We can lever that tool back down when the market.
It's been stuck to the floor now for a while, and they want to try and raise it a little so they have something to do. 100%. The Fed has two tools. They can print and they can raise and lower rates. Like, that's it.
Yeah, and they don't want to really go to negative. So we'd like to get the interest rates up to like 2%, so that when the next crash happens, they can just lower back down to zero again, is my guess. I don't think they can go much higher than that. And if you talk to like Greg Foss and them, he'll say it's 11th grade math. They can't even get there. I mean, we'll see, right? It's all depending on what the market decides they want to do. And I understand the cost of capital decreases profitability for the companies. Just curious what you think, though. Like, what do you think with the Fed right now? How far can they push this before the markets maybe start to crack and then it starts all over again?
I think it's weird. So, I'm deeply confused by it every time I spend a lot of time thinking about it, but it's always, very hard to come to solid conclusions. Or one of the things is like they keep changing the definition of terms. So like a taper now means less aggressive printing, right? Or temporary inflation is any amount of inflation that doesn't last forever. And it's like, I'm not sure. And then, I was listening to guys that are smarter than me on this, listening to Jeff Snyder, Mike Green, and Harley Bossman, I think. I can't remember his last name. But, essentially, they were having the debate about, that the Fed is not printing money. And there's this is starting to circulate in macro econ circles. I've been hearing it from Lynn Alden a little bit, like essentially that, the Fed is doing a version of quantitative easing and that they're expanding the balance sheets, which is causing asset prices to inflate, right? But it's not hitting the broad market economy because it hasn't gotten into the hands of normal people. So you can conceptualize this like printing money and burying it in a big hole in the desert. Like, yeah, that's not going to cause inflation in the broad market economy because it's in a hole in the desert. And that hole in the desert is rich people's assets, right? So like, I'm sure the home values in your neighborhood are up tremendously, as are mine, as are most people's who live in desirable areas, right? Or like your stock portfolio has done well over the past, And so you go back to like 2010 when there was like a raging inflation debate and the inflationists were wrong, right? And the reason they were wrong is because everything went into assets. And I guess the question I've been asking myself now is like, because I felt that, that's my intuitive feeling is that we're going to get significant inflation. But what I've been asking myself is, are we, or are things actually going to be deflationary, which is something like, me and you have talked about all year. And, man, it's just really hard to wrap your head around.
It's so macroeconomics. It's like we didn't go to school for this kind of shit. So, we're trying our best to figure it out as everybody else is. And so is the Fed, which is the crazy part.
Everyone's trying to figure it out. I think there's a psychology here where I think the Fed knows they have to print. I think the market knows the Fed has to print. I think everybody knows there's coming injections of liquidity. But if you just say, okay, yeah, we print forever, that's what we do now, we're the Fed, you kind of give up all of your power. You give up the goat, you give up the game. And so the Fed has to stand strong, and then the market will bully the Fed into capitulating. And so I think like you might see the market, like you've been talking about this, I think you might see the market dump for sure. Because, why not? Like, let's dump. The Fed will come in and inject liquidity. We'll rebuy. Everything will be great again. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's how Wall Street thinks about it. You know.
I was just having this kind of debate. One of my former tech buddy friends that sold a company for a bunch and had a bunch of money, and he started to invest in the stock market and stuff. He's now in the silver. He's probably going to watch this. I'm not going to name his name, but I don't get the silver thing. If you're watching, still don't get it. He's saying because the price is low, obviously, right? But he said something that was kind of interesting. He's like saying he's saying the same thing you're saying. He's like, they're really not really printing money, and he's kind of getting into the details, like the specifics about how it all works and stuff. And I was like, he's saying it's nice. He goes, the one thing he said to me was really interesting. He's like, the Fed doesn't care what the stock prices are or the market averages are for the S&P and the Dow. And I said, I agree with you to some extent. That's not their mandate, but their mandate is about employment, right? We've heard them talk about this, right? All the different Fed governors and stuff. And it is about employment. So think about this, HODL. If you're an executive or a board member for a publicly traded company and they increase the cost of capital by increasing the rates, it's going to decrease the profitability. You trade as a multiple of earnings. So what would you and I possibly do to try to fix that? I would lay some people off, right? I'd say, okay, we got to, with one lever we can do if we're a low margin business with like single digit net income, and all of a sudden our cost of capital goes up and impacts the bottom line, you got to lay some people off. And the Fed doesn't want to allow that. And I think that's why the cycle keeps happening, right? Because every time they start to increase the rates, they increase the cost of capital. And listen, we have a double whammy going on. You have a Democratic administration that's increasing the taxes in addition to the Fed wanting increasing rates, which is decreasing profitability for companies that trade as a multiple of their earnings. And it's going to impact dramatically the compensation plan for all these executives that are running these companies. So what are they going to do? At some point, we don't know when. Is it Q1, Q2? Some point they're going to start to lay people off, and then the Fed has to respond to that. That's my opinion.
No, I think you're very close to reality. You've been a market participant for about 10 years longer than I have, so like you have a good sense of things. I'm hearing that a lot from the macro econ guys, like that the fiscal side is going to be the downfall of this whole thing. You got the political class up in arms either direction, right? Like the Republicans are going to attempt to stymie all of these attempts from the fiscal side as best they can. I mean, look at Joe Manchin, who's been, he made the Dems give up a bunch of concessions and then he blocked them anyway. And he was like, no, you can't just print $3 trillion, not while I'm here. And that's how the Republican side is going to be the entire time, essentially. So it's interesting. It's like we think, a year ago, I think we were talking about the Biden administration, the Build Back Better plan and the Green New Deal and all this kind of stuff is like, being something they could easily push through and they would print trillions and it would go into the broad market economy and cause inflation, et cetera. And now it seems like that's not the case. And so, if it's going to be all these swaps with the Fed rather than primarily coming from the fiscal side, will it cause inflation? I think that's the question I keep going back to in my mind. I think possibly the answer is no. But it's difficult to wrap your head around. And then I've been lately trying to understand the euro dollars futures market, and Jesus Christ, that's opaque as hell. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to understand. But there's something at play there with like essentially the majority of dollars that are created outside of the system. So the Fed does not create the majority of dollars. The majority of dollars are created over in Europe via traditional lending routes, right? And so, yeah, man, I think the end of this year has been just me just munching down on some humble pie. You know what I mean? Like I gotta really I thought I knew a lot of things about Bitcoin. And the truth is I did know a lot of things about Bitcoin, but I didn't know as much as I thought I knew about the world or the traditional financial system. And I'm trying to learn those things to get caught up because it's a big boy asset now, right? Like
yes.
we're half the size of Apple computer. So we're big.
Well, the one thing I'm thinking about is like Michael Saylor, really smart guy. He's got a lot of money, had a lot of money for a long time. But his narrative and the things he talks about, he talks about the things we're talking about, which is it's a hedge, not a hedge to inflation, but they're inflating, they're printing. He says all these things, right? But now it seems like there's a shift going on, like you described with Jeff Snyder and others, and they're saying, well, that's not really true. And it's like, I would love to hear what he has to say about what they're now saying, because I don't think he agrees with that. I think he agrees with the original narrative that we've all been saying, unless I misunderstood what he was saying.
So there's this there's this counter narrative that like essentially we're arguing over semantics and that the Fed doing swaps or the Fed doing QE or the Fed doing whatever, that's still just money printing, right? Doesn't matter where it goes. If it's not going into broad market economy and affecting the price that your grandmother pays for milk, who cares? It's still affecting large macroeconomic trends and it's still creating this big gulf between the haves and the have-nots in society, which ultimately is going to, I fear, end in social revolution. And so, the American political climate and the Western political climate has never been frothier than it is now. And, it's a direct result of, economics rules, cash rules everything around me. You know what I mean? Like, so
I literally just put that up in my story the other day.
it's true. Cash rules everything around me, man. The dollar is the wrecking ball that goes around the world. And that's been a Michael Saylor narrative also, is essentially like that the dollar and Bitcoin are working in tandem to both strengthen each other. So every time the dollar prints, it strengthens Bitcoin as a store of value, and Bitcoin helps the dollar, more seamlessly cross borders. And I think that's an interesting narrative too, because one of the things that everybody said, for the first 10 years, Jack Dorsey said it on Twitter the other day, is to Cardi B no less. He's she goes, "Do you think that crypto will replace the dollar?" And Jack Dorsey said, "Yes, Bitcoin will." And I got to tell you,
I saw that.
yeah, I got to tell you, after being in Bitcoin for a long time, I am not so certain that we replace the dollar. I am much more certain of Bitcoin as a store of value than I am as Bitcoin as a widespread medium of exchange.
Yeah.
And I think they're not mutually exclusive. You can be a store of value without being a medium of exchange. It's not like we use houses to pay for, we don't use houses to pay for sandwiches, right? And we never will. We did actually used to use gold to settle up back in the day, but mainly we were on an IOU type system where it was like, you ever have your grandfather send you to like get an oil change or something in the car, and then he'd be like, "Just tell the guy put it on my tab," like that's. I used to have that still back in the '90s. That was still going on because of these small towns in America. But yeah, that's a holdover from the gold standard, and I don't know. I'm sort of in the mode where I'm reevaluating all of my preconceived notions and coming up to different conclusions, trying to interface with reality on reality's terms and look at what it's giving me.
VJ's got. I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, and I thought his, I guess, a dissertation almost, right? His original essay, which turned into the book, is such a great narrative, and how he walks you through the history of the money, and then also how the evolution of Bitcoin becoming a medium of exchange and a unit account over time is possible. But I asked him, when do you think that is? And he's like, at least 50 years. So if he believes it's going to happen, but it's way out, dude. Like we're probably not even here when that happens,
I used to say that too. And then I think I started making money on Bitcoin. I got super bullish, and I basically like lost my objectivity, which is like, hey, it happens. And now that the year has been choppy, I've sort of regained some objectivity, and I would agree with VJ that this is an extremely long process. And it could take 100 years. It could be something. It could be something that doesn't happen.
And it could also just never happen. It's also
Yeah.
possible. And I said this to you when I first met you a year ago, and we talked about these things. I was coming from it from a perspective of like a technology guy. And so I had a different perspective than you guys. But my perspective was like, I'm not saying that it's going to get replaced as the store of value. I think it's always going to be the pristine asset that it is. But we don't know. Who would have guessed that? And by the way, I just had Bram Cohen on. I was telling you, because you gave me some good questions for him, by the way, about Len. That was let me wait till you say it. That was good. But at the end of the day, it was like, could there be something else that comes along? These guys, and he was at the precipice of that at that time, right? It was him and Len and Hal Finney and all these guys and Szabos and all of them, right? So like at the end of the day, that came out of nowhere, right? They solved things that weren't able to be solved before. Could there be another 10x from here in 50 years? I think there could. It's technology, and who knows what the future holds. So there could be something else that eventually it's just the way tech works. And when I say this to Jimmy Song, he'll say, this is not technology, it's monetary, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, bro, but it is underlying, it is tech at the end of the day. And I don't think it's the stuff we're seeing in the altcoin market now. It's probably something else.
So yeah, I agree with what you said. I don't discount that there could be a 10 or 100x improvement on Bitcoin. I would never discount that. I think ultimately there will be, and we may still call that thing Bitcoin. Who knows? You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
But
could be a fork. Who knows? Yeah.
But there's a lot of talk in the crypto space, writ large, that is essentially about oh yeah, our altcoin is quantum resistant, and it's like, well, how can it be quantum resistant when there isn't even really a powerful quantum computer? And even if there is, you don't have access to one. Google has it in a back room somewhere. So it's like, for me, I don't see the innovation, quote unquote, in the space right now.
I agree.
And if I did, I would be excited about it, and I would probably be in on it, the quote unquote next thing. I do think, though, that if you have this, money's a sort of a special use case, and this is where the Jimmy Song argument comes into play. It's like, when you have a money, it's very sticky. In fact, it's so sticky that the dogma of it pervades our lives. So, like,
Yeah.
I had never even thought of the possibility that the dollar could be replaced until I was like, I don't know, 25, and I discovered Bitcoin. Right? It had never even occurred to me that that could happen because it's this pervasive dogma that I grew up with. It's like never questioning God or something like that, right? And then when you do begin to question it, a lot of things can unravel for you. But I think the problem is if you flip in Bitcoin, you have this continual flippening process where everybody is always trying to catch the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And that's not it, maybe technologically that's possible now, but it's not how the human mind works. And humans still have to do the mental accounting and suffer the mental burden of thinking in and transacting in this money. And so, we tend to see reserve currencies last about 100 to 200 years over time. So if Bitcoin does become the reserve currency, I think it will reign for a while. And then, like anything else, possibly its reign will be over, but we'll all be dead. So
So I was talking to Bram, and obviously towards the end of the interview, we talk about his coin, the Chia coin. And
Chia coin, yeah.
the only thing I said to him was pretty simple. I asked him early in the interview, do you believe in network effects? And he's like, of course. I mean, he can't, right? And I was like, do you believe that Bitcoin has network effect? He goes, of course. And I go, so how do you overcome that network effect? And he's telling me how many nodes they have, 350,000. I go, that's not the network effect. And it was back to what you said, actually, Otto. I said, this is a monetary network. You're looking at it as a user network, right? So from a user network perspective, yeah, Bitcoin's pretty small, right? Actually, from a monetary network perspective, it's actually really small, right? Because I think the addressable market size for Bitcoin is probably $1 to $200 trillion, roughly,
Yeah,
the
maybe
assets of
maybe
today value.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of shitload of store value and everything out there these days. Like you said about the houses, is my house really worth what it is worth? Not really, but people are putting money in these things because they have nowhere to put their money, right? So there's a little bit of that. So I said to him, I go, from that perspective, you have a market cap of like a couple $1 billion or something like that, right? For his coin. How are you going to accelerate your market cap and pull the money in? So think about somebody like Carl Icahn. Carl Icahn has, I guess, like a $20 billion net worth, right?
Yeah.
So if Carl decides I want to put 5%, $1 billion into an asset, into a cryptocurrency, he's not putting it in Chia. Like that's not protected, right? There's no deep liquidity in that asset for him at that point, right? So he has to go into Bitcoin if and when he flips decide to do that, as Michael Saylor did, as at some point where Ray Dalio had to buy some. All these guys are going to start buying it, and they're just going to go where the money's at. The money feels protected by being with all the other money, right? To the point that I think you raised. So I don't understand how anybody who's buying, like the problem is they're not thinking about this stuff, right? The average person, they're thinking in fiat dollars of I can buy this and I can flip it and I get more dollars. And maybe they can if they're good at timing this, but that's pure luck in my opinion. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is the dominant network effect, and the network externality here is the money. It's $1 trillion market cap. It's not that there's $1 trillion in it, right? But it's $1 trillion market cap, and there's nothing that even comes close to that other than, I guess, Ethereum at a few $100 billion. So the only thing that has a chance would be Ethereum, but we know that that's a broken protocol essentially. So I don't understand how it happens with the current ecosystem of things that we look out there. And when guys like Bram Cohen, and I have a lot of respect for this guy, he fucking invented the BitTorrent protocol.
No, me too. Me too.
Massive respect for him. I just don't understand. I asked him, by the way, I got to tell you this. I said, when did you first buy Bitcoin and did you ever sell it? And he says, no, I never bought it. Yeah. Like, what? Yeah. So you're creating this coin because you fucking missed it completely? Like, I don't understand, dude.
I'm not going to go on a long rant shit talking Chia, but one of the things that was funny to me was when they said they weren't going to cause us, supply chain disruptions, and they immediately did because incentives are a motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like incentives are their own viral loops. They're their own network effects, and we don't often consider this. Like sometimes we say that the Bitcoin network is secured by energy or secured by hash rate, secured by miners, whatever. The Bitcoin network is secured by human greed. Okay, so because for the first time in history, you are able to gain more from working in conjunction with a system to defend the system than you are by attacking the system. That's the first time in virtual history, in the history of distributed systems, that has happened, and that's a really big deal. That's a really big idea, and I still think not enough people understand this, right? And it's funny because it's like in the early days, the percentage gains were phenomenal, but you'd have to be a crazy person to put in, like, let's say $100 million to Bitcoin, right? So now the percentage gains are going down, but the nominal gains are going sky high, right? So if you put in $100 million to Bitcoin, whenever, like last year or something, you're up like 60 million bucks, right? So it's like I'm over here crying to my Cheerios and we're up like 60-70% for the year. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of funny. And maybe like Bitcoin has become, the growth trajectory is slower and it's not going to do the thing everybody thinks it's going to do, where it where the dollar hyperinflates and we become prime beneficiaries of that. Maybe that's not going to happen, right? But if we go up 50-60% per year every year for the next 10 years, that's crazy. That's like Tesla's growth over the last decade, right?
Yeah.
I think Tesla did 67% CAGR. Me and you always talk CAGR, and I think it's important to keep your eyes on the prize with CAGR. Put your blinders on and be like, hey, listen, man, if I got a good thing, like, listen, like, it's like I love my wife. My wife is beautiful. She's sweet. She's smart. There are other women out there that are beautiful, sweet, and smart. But if I start trying to divert my attention, things are going to go disastrous at home on the home front. So you got to keep blinders on, eyes on the prize, straight ahead.
And I literally just had my stepdad was in my house the other day, and I was talking to my dad, and I said, because I got him in Bitcoin. I told you I finally got him to buy some Bitcoin, right? So he buys Bitcoin, and he's telling me before they're leaving, like 10 minutes before he leaves, he brings up Bitcoin. So you're seeing the big price of Bitcoin lately, and I was like, yeah, it's not doing so great. It's not what we thought, but
Right.
it's way up for the year, not from where you bought it. He bought it in the 40s, right? I go, it's not doing great. I go, could do better. He's like, but I could have sold it. I could have sold it at 64 and bought it back. I swear he said this to me. He goes, I could have bought it back at 29. And I was like, okay. He goes, and then I could have went all the way up to 69 and sold it again and bought it back at these. I go, no, you couldn't have done that because you didn't know that was going to happen. Here's the exercise, right? This is the exercise. Right now on a piece of paper, write down where you think the next bottom is when you're going to buy it, and where do you think the next top is when you're going to sell it, and the dates. You write that down and you come back to me, give it to me now, and I'll look at that, and then I could say you should be trading this. But nobody knows that. It's easy to look back.
I mean, it's like, dude, what you're going to stand next to the roulette table and see black, black, red, red, black, black, red, and you're going to say, "Damn, I should have played black, black, red, red, black, black, black." Like, no, that's not how things work,
Yeah.
Because you know what's going to happen?
My mom's going, she's like, but you're not listening, Jay. Like, we could have done that, right? And I was like, no, you couldn't have done that, Mom. You couldn't have done that because you don't know the future. I was like, whatever. This is the first time they've ever been in an asset that trades liquid like this. They'd never had stocks, right? And I said, listen, Dad, I've been doing this for over 10 years, trading stocks. As you know, I used to trade. I was really good at it, actually. But hyper frequency, like high frequency, And I did like a lot of RSI trading and this kind of stuff, MACD, et cetera. And I don't suggest anybody do that because most people get their faces ripped off. I had no emotion. I didn't care what the symbol was. It was all numbers and charts. And I know we make fun of all these guys, like that guy used to come on Clubhouse, but the sentiment thing's stupid. But like I looked purely at the numbers. And I didn't care, have no emotion. And the only time I did make a mistake is when I let my emotions get involved. And that's where you lose money every time. And I'm telling you, if you're first that and you're new at it, you're going to get your face ripped off.
This is a thing that we have as human beings. We all have activity bias, right? We want to be doing something rather than nothing because to do something feels good. And I feel like there's this quote, I can't remember who it's by, but it basically says that the vast majority of humanity's problems come because man cannot simply sit in a room by himself, and it's like when you look at the portfolios of dead investors, they outperform living investors because everybody wants to use the liquidity to their benefit and jump in and out and do this and do that and do this, generate a bunch of taxable events, have to pay the government a portion of your stack, right? Like, even if you get the timing right, you still have to swear fealty to the government. You have to give them their piece, unless you're going to end up in a very small cage with a very large man named Bubba. You know what I mean? It's like, so what are you doing, right? Like, you're just sit still and do nothing, but it's incredibly difficult to do that. To tell somebody to buy Bitcoin and then wait for 10 years is dead simple. It's the simplest strategy in the world. Everybody can understand it. A 3-year-old can understand it, right?
You actually the one that clued me into this, and I never really thought about it this way. You're like you create your wealth by taking a risk, right? And you hodl and you hold and you compound, right?
Yep.
And I was trading a lot of stocks and stuff, and then once you get your wealth, a lot of people go into wealth preservation mode, right? And they get a little more like little risk averse, I guess. But you're right. Like you kill you. Like, how did you create your wealth? I goes, I built a company. So I go, no, you had stock in your company. You held the stock in that company. You didn't trade the stock. You built the business and you grew it and it cagered, right? And then I was like, it's actually true. I didn't think about it that way. Everybody that's created wealth, all these entrepreneurs that you see, all these investors, they hold. That's how you do it, because you don't pay tax on unrealized gains, which brings me into the next topic, which is Elizabeth Warren. But you don't pay taxes on unrealized gains currently, right? And you allow yourself to compound that wealth over time, and you can exit at some point for the money and then invest in something else.
Warren Buffett's on record saying that diversification is for people who are non-sophisticated. And he's right, right? Like, Carnegie has a quote that says, if you want to get rich, put all your eggs in one basket and then watch the basket. Concentration is the quickest way to both go up really fast and to go down really fast.
Correct.
So you got to make sure you're right. And if you feel right, if you've done the work, if you've built the conviction, if you have the knowledge base, if you've protected your downside risk, you can feel confident to go more concentrated, right? If you haven't done the work, though, you shouldn't be comfortable at all. You should totally diversify, because anything could happen because you don't know what you're doing, right? And that's why the advice for everybody is to invest with a FA or a robo advisor, whatever, and then just go into broad market index funds and be done with it, right? And then just save a fixed percentage of your salary, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, so for me, it's like telling somebody that you should HODL for 10 years. It is so simple, but it is not easy. It is a very difficult thing to do, and you're going to have to steel your resolve every single day. It's like a meditative practice. You wake up and you go, I just lost that much money. I just gained that much money, right? And it actually gets harder as you go up, as you start to be right, and you start winning. Well, not only that, but you can buy the lifestyle you always wanted, right? You can fly first class now. You can eat in fancy restaurants. You can stay at the Ritz-Carlton. You know what I mean? And so when you have the ability to do such things and you don't, that requires just tremendous restraint and self-discipline. And people that can do that end up with the most wealth, right? And it's it's sort of a fun game you play against yourself too, or at least I enjoy it. Maybe I'm a psychopath who likes. I'm a masochist. Yeah, exactly.
So what about Elizabeth Warren? She's a lunatic. She's out there saying that Elon doesn't pay any taxes, and what's going on with this lady? I mean, she's so disingenuous. It's crazy.
Their interaction on Twitter was really quite funny. I laughed a lot at it. And I thought to myself, God, does Elon Musk have some balls, like some serious balls, to say this to a sitting senator? But he's right. I mean, his argument was all fact-based. He is going to pay more tax than any human in history, and Elizabeth Warren has deemed it not good enough, right? And it's like,
I mean, it's
confusing.
And that doesn't even go into how many taxes he's paying as a corporation, payroll tax, and everything else. I mean, come on.
It's confusing to me, especially because she's on the left, and the left is very concerned with climate change, and Elon Musk is one of the top people trying to combat climate change by creating electric cars, and you want to demonize him for political gain? I don't know. I mean, this is just political, nonsense. Theater. Yeah, it's theater. It's something she had the interaction on Facebook with a link to donate her money. She had like screenshot it and was like, look at this billionaire wants to get out of paying his fair share. Send me $10 so I can take him to task, right? It's like, really? So yeah, I mean, the Elizabeth Warren and the far left cohort, the AOCs of the world, or the Ilhan Omars, they do want to do wealth confiscation in America. And what that will look like is anyone's guess, but I think it'll look like a 1% wealth tax to start on people over $50 million. There's another scary proposal where they want to raid people's Roths, which I think is insipidly evil.
When you and I have loaded up, it's like, it really pisses me off, because I could have just put it in other assets. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I can't take it out because I got to pay a penalty. It's a joke.
If you want to stop the Roth going forward, I guess I understand that, but to change the rules on regular Americans midstream, and by the way, we paid tax on this money before we put it in. We would not have had to pay tax if we had put it into a non-taxable retirement account like a regular IRA. So I paid you taxes, and now you're changing the rules of the game on me midstream, and you're going to do a required minimum distribution or something equivalent, or who knows what will happen, right? But I just think it's, it always makes me feel bad, and it makes me feel bad for America because I feel like capitalism is under attack in America, and it's becoming harder and harder for the young, ambitious person to strive and survive. And that's not something that we can signal as Americans. We can't afford to, because we've always been a place for capital to land from overseas. So if we're now trying to steal people's money, that's the death of America. People will not bring their money here, and that's very bad for all of us, right? So like, rich people are always going to be a thing, man. There's always going to be somebody richer than you. Even though I do pretty well for myself, there are people that are much richer than me, much, much richer than me. And I don't let it bother me. Just focus on yourself. Yeah, focus on yourself. you know?
I just think about my kids and the future heirs, and that's the only thing I'm focused on.
Well, and there is this thing about, because of this money printing, the rich get richer more so than ever before. And there's like a public-private partnership where essentially like you can privatize the gains and socialize the losses because of moral hazard at the big banks and all that kind of stuff, right? The corporate socialism stuff. That stuff is terrible, obviously. And it should, we should try our best to root it out. But I think it's causing people to give up on capitalism prematurely. And capitalism is the only system that works, kind of like democracy. Like, are we all having a good time under democracy the last 2 years? Not really, not really, but it's still the least worst system, right? It's the only system we figured out that works. Capitalism's the same thing. The other systems literally lead to starvation and death. So, we got to dance with who brung us, basically,
All right, so let's talk about NFTs because that was hot this year, right? I think that had an impact to the price of Bitcoin dramatically. Like that's capital that could have flowed into Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. I think NFTs did take a chunk out of Bitcoin's price appreciation this year because, in the 2017 ICO bubble, you needed to go straight into Bitcoin in order to get access to the ICOs for the most part. Some of them were taking Ethereum, but 90% of it was you had to buy Bitcoin first to even participate in the markets. And this time that wasn't true. You could just go right on OpenSea with, link your ACH account and then, transfer money over or transfer Ethereum or whatever. So I think that market was primarily an Ethereum driven market. I mean, we know that there's NFTs on Bitcoin, but few people actually do know that. And that hasn't been a popular narrative this year because there's not a lot of money or VCs or anybody pushing it. And so, yeah, and Web3 has been a popular narrative and that kind of interacts with NFTs. And I don't know if you caught the whole Twitter beef between Chris Dixon and Jack Dorsey the other night.
I
Oh,
didn't
you
see
didn't
that.
see
No,
this?
I
Oh
didn't.
my
You got to
God.
send me that one.
Oh, you got to see this. I'll repeat it from memory, but basically Jack Dorsey wrote out a tweet that said, Web3, it's just a centralized bullshit service being pushed on you by the VCs. It's Web2 was you are the product, and Web3 is like you are the exit liquidity for the pre-mine, right? And so it's the same meet the new boss, same as the old boss kind
Oh,
of
yeah, it's
thing,
in the New
right?
York Times and everything. Yeah, I got to
Yeah,
read
yeah,
this.
yeah. And then Chris Dixon responded to him and was basically like, "We'd really like you to, interact with Ethereum, and this is a real thing, and yada yada." And Jack, I think, told him something to the effect of like, "You're a fund trying to become a media empire. You're not Gandhi." You know what I mean? Like Jack was going hard, and I fully support Jack because he understands where the incentives are at. And, he has, I mean, you think Jack Dorsey doesn't know what's happening in the Valley? He's one of the most powerful people in the Valley, right? Like everybody comes to him, everybody bends the knee to Jack Dorsey. Even Chris Dixon was bending the knee during this argument. And Jack is basically saying, I don't trust you and I don't trust your incentives and I do trust Bitcoin, right? And that's why people like El Salvador are trusting Bitcoin. That's why I'm trying to bring Bitcoin to Africa, right? Like that's why I'm trying to bring, Bitcoin to America's disenfranchised because there's no VCs at the center of it to bastardize things. There's nobody to dump on you, to change the rule set, right? There's nobody to rug pull you. One of the phrases that VCs use that I cannot stand is short time to liquidity. Oh, the thing with these instruments is they're great because there's a short time to liquidity. What that means is, hey man, we bought this shit for 4 cents. We're gonna dump it on some idiot in the Midwest for $8 because fuck them. Because fuck them. That's why. I need another Ferrari for my mountain home, right? It's like I can't stand it, man. And yeah, so the whole NFT market and the Web3 thing and the DeFi stuff, and it's just a den of thieves. I mean, if you want my honest opinion about it, it's just an absolute den of thieves. No one's gonna pay for a picture of a monkey 10 years from now. Why would they do that? Why would anyone do that?
I'm reading Chris's tweet right now. It says, "I'm a huge fan of Jack and hope that we can eventually bring him around to ETH and other blockchains. Bitcoin is great as a digital gold, but there are other important applications that require other chains. Why? You could put it on top of Bitcoin on a second layer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I missing something? I don't understand. So why don't they just build that? Why don't they just do that? Why don't they invest in stuff?
There's no incentive for them to do that.
The incentives is what Jack said. Yeah.
Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, I happen to know, both own large sums of Bitcoin. And once you own a large sum of Bitcoin and you have this economic machine behind you, which is A16Z, you got to make your LPs happy. You got to find things that make them happy. I mean, some of the LPs for A16Z are like really large pension funds and things now, right? So they're at a whole other strata. and they need to find ways to generate alpha for these people, out on the risk cliff.
Yeah, they have to push large sums into investments, and at the
Yes.
moment, there's nowhere to put it in Bitcoin on the second layer. That's really what it comes down to.
Absolutely. And they have a high time preference mentality, and they don't want to wait and build out the infrastructure that Bitcoin needs. I mean, Bitcoin needs a
Yeah.
lot of infrastructure on layer 2, and it's slowly being built out by people who care, right? Like us. Not me, I'm not building anything, but like Jack Mahler's, me and him share viewpoints on a lot of things. And he's crushing it, and the guys at Lightning Labs are crushing it, and
Yeah.
there's real stuff happening here. And it's funny because the people who participate mainly in shitcoins, man, they don't know about any of this. They don't know
Yeah.
about Bitcoin, the network. They don't know what's happening. They're not tracking things. And
Yeah.
and when I talk to people that I know, like the high level cryptographers and the high level devs, and all of these guys who are like absolute rock star devs, the stuff they're talking about is so next level. It's really hard to wrap my mind around. It's happening so fast. The pace of innovation is crazy, and these guys are inventing the concepts of tomorrow, right? And it's just exciting to be there. Whereas when I look at the shitcoin world, essentially there's a bunch of people saying they're doing that, but then obfuscating the fact that they're not really doing anything, and it's just vaporware, right? Like people keep being like, "Oh yeah, Cardano is going to launch soon, like next month or something." And it's like, "Wait, what? They haven't even launched? What are you talking about?" It's confusing.
All right, let's talk about Plan B. Is he dead? Is he a dead man walking?
I think, what's he have, like 3 million Twitter followers now? Something crazy.
He's coming on my show next month, actually, but I wanted to get him on this year because he
Yeah.
missed. This is the first time he missed, right? So I'm just like, is it over? Like, what's his relevance if it's no longer true, right? Like, I don't know. And I love the guy. I'm not saying anything I don't like. I'm not trying to shit on Plan B for crying out loud. I'm just saying his whole thing is stock to flow, and if it's not going to work, like, why are we listening to that anymore?
So let me say this about Plan B. I've been an early Plan B fan. I think I was one of the first 1,000 people that followed him on Twitter. So now he's 3.1 million or something. I was one of the
Yeah.
I was one of the first 1,000 people. Yeah, because I caught him on one of the niche Bitcoin podcasts, and he explained his theory, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Follow, right? And if you go back and listen to old episodes of him on Stefan Livera, he does say things like in 2021, Bitcoin could go to 50K. And that's part of the lower band of the model. And so I think, the model is very wide, actually. It's an order of magnitude
Yeah.
model, right? So it's like, I think we still technically are within the limits and the tolerances of the model. So if we end the year at 50K, there are going to be a lot of people saying Plan B was wrong, but in terms of his original timescale model, I don't believe we're wrong. Now the problem with Plan B, he doesn't do himself any favors because he's created like 3 or 4 models, and they all say different things. And so it's like, okay, the one model says 288, the other says 100, the other says 50, the other says 500. Which one am I supposed to believe here? Because that's a really wide range. That's a 10x range. So yeah, listen, it didn't work out. This is not just a Plan B's detriment. It didn't work out how any of us were expecting it this year.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. There's too many
And
exogenous events and things happening this year. Yeah.
it was a big year. A lot of crazy shit happened. El Salvador, Tesla, China mining ban, congressional hearings, right? Like all sorts of stuff.
Yep. NFTs, like we just said, just a lot of factors coming in.
NFTs, DeFi, Web3, so we're not used to having this level of attention put on us. And we've had a high level of scrutiny this year. And, I think the price performed, it was weaker than we thought it was going to be. It was still a very good year. Bitcoin's $1 trillion asset class now. We did very well. By traditional asset standards, this is an amazing year. By Bitcoin standards, it's womp womp. It's disappointing, right? Yeah. So, for Plan B, I think, listen, I think he's gonna have to take a lot of shit. as anybody on Twitter who's wildly bullish, listen, I have to take shit because I was telling people 500K by Christmas. That's obviously not happening, and
I'm taking shit too. My parents are all over my ass. So
I deserve the shit. I deserve it. But if you believe
you'll
in
be
the
good
thesis,
next year. Everybody good in a year or two. You'll be fine.
if you're convicted in the trade and you believe in the thesis, like, come on, man, we're just gonna keep hodling. That's what we do. The other stuff is stuff we talk about for fun to pass the time. But the core mission is just hodl, keep hodling, hodl. Michael Saylor said this thing the other day that was like, you don't wait to buy Bitcoin, you buy Bitcoin and wait, right? So that's what we do. We're just waiting around, killing time, basically. So Plan B, I salute you. You have my blessing. Fuck it. We were all wrong. It wasn't just you. I'm not gonna pretend like it was just you.
I love it. No, I think it's cool, man. I mean, his whole thing is that, the one thing about Plan B that was really interesting is he's this another anonymous name, an alias, right? And
Mhm.
but it's not that hard to probably figure out who he is because he says he ran $100 billion fund. There's not that many people that ran $100 billion fund with an accent that he has, right? Come on.
He's like Norwegian or something, right? So it's like
Right. So it's like your voice is out there. It's a distinctive voice, and you're saying you ran $100 billion fund. I'm sure there's a lot of people who know who he is.
there's only like less than 100 people that could be, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And I've never even dug in to figure it out, but it's like
Nah.
that's not a hard one to figure out.
You're never really anonymous online. The only person who ever was Satoshi. I mean, he's the only person who ever retained his anonymity.
Listen, let's go to that, right? Because we got about 15 more minutes, right? So I had Bram on, and you were like, ask him if he thinks his best friend that he used to be roommates with, Len Sassman, was Satoshi, and his answer was, you got to watch the interview. He was just like, I was like, that says it all. The fuck, dude? What are you pausing for? And he was like, it very well could be, but I'm not. I don't know. He never told me it was, and I was like, holy shit. And he gave a lot of things that, like, he apparently, I guess Len had like a lot of anonymous usernames in different cyberpunk kind of chats and this and that, and they had different personalities in them too. They weren't all his personality and stuff, like the way he
Ah,
talked and everything.
that's
Very
interesting.
interesting information that he gave in that interview. I was like, that's interesting. So is it him? He says when he first, like back in the day, he didn't have the chops from a programming perspective to be him, but he got much better over the years. So it's possible. He's like, it could be anybody. It could have been Hal. Who knows, right? But I thought it was interesting. What do you think? I'm just curious what you think.
Well, the Len thing is interesting because him and Bram were roommates back in the day, and he was around the whole scene. There were like to the point about Plan B and how there's only like a couple hundred people who could be Plan B. There were only a couple hundred people who were engaging in these sorts of websites and talking about these sorts of ideas and digital cash, etc. Back in the day. So if you were on the Cypherpunk mailing list, that was a pretty exclusive list. I mean that cements your status forever as OG. It's like being one of the original disciples or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Len was on the list, and he's one of the candidates. And basically, everybody on the list is some sort of candidate. Julian Assange was on the list, right? Nick Szabo was on the list. Hal Finney, Adam Back, all those guys. Wei Dai, what's his name? David Chom. So they were all on there. They were all trying to figure these things out. They're all super geniuses, by the way. I mean, I wouldn't take anything away
A
from
bunch of
any.
them aren't with us too. That's crazy how that turned
Bunch of
out.
them have
That's
died.
weird.
The truth is, like, I don't know. I think personally for me as a Bitcoiner, I don't want Satoshi to ever be unmasked. I think that's bad. So even if Satoshi is credibly unmasked, I think that we as a Bitcoin community, and I think we will do this reflexively, but I think we should have an I am Spartacus moment where we go, I'm Satoshi. I'm Satoshi. I'm Satoshi. I'm Satoshi. We're all Satoshi, right? So this guy's not Satoshi. And then, unfortunately, we'll have to destroy that individual's reputation because it's no good for Bitcoin.
Totally agree. Yeah, and if it is somebody that we figure out who it is and they're not with us anymore, that's probably okay too. But somebody who's, yeah,
That's for the best. It would be best to pin it on like a Hal Finney because as far as I know, the guy was above reproach, really great guy, family guy, genius level coder, all that kind of stuff, right?
yeah.
Hal also ghost wrote PGP in the fight against the American government in the encryption wars. So, I mean, he was a real badass, right? And I don't know, man. There's a short list. Everybody knows there's a
I
short
didn't know
list.
I didn't know the Len thing. When you brought to my attention, I started digging into it, and there was a bunch of stuff online. I was like, wow, this is a real option, a real possibility. I don't know what the probability is, but it's a possibility.
Well, on the day he died, there's like a tribute to him in the blockchain.
Yes, I read that too. Yeah, there's like a picture of him in the code, and yeah, forever it's immortalized.
Yeah, I mean, just being on the list of potential Satoshi contenders is like legendary status. Yeah, yeah. You're a legend forever.
I would say that Bram is possibly on that list, very small percentage chance, because he was at the precipice of it too. But I asked him a question. I said, when did you first learn about Bitcoin? When did you first buy it? And did you ever sell it? And he's like, I never bought it. And I first learned
Yeah.
about it in 2013. I'm like, how did you first learn about it in 2013? And he's like, I probably heard about it in passing here and there. He's like, but I was very dismissive in the beginning. I was doing what I was doing with BitTorrent. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Cause like, that's around the time that I was starting to look into it a little bit, and I didn't buy it until 2016, but he
Absolutely.
never bought it. And I'm like, how could you have never bought it? But I didn't follow up and say to him, HODL, was, well, you didn't buy it. Do you own it?
A lot of people, I ignored it when I first heard about it, and I was not a person who was not uninterested in said things. I wasn't as deep as like a Bram Cohen or something like that, obviously, because I'm not at his skill level. But I was interested in these types of things, and when somebody first told me about it, I was like, "That's stupid." I just was cocky, and I was like, "That's
Yeah.
dumb." And I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was like the Pirate Bay, where they had it was a centralized server, but they played whack-a-mole with the U.S. government, and then they mirrored it and all sorts of shit like that. And I was just like, I don't want to be involved in that. That sounds like the FBI is going to take that down any day now, right? And then it turns out like it was a real thing, and it was a real innovation, and it wasn't illegal. And I felt like a real doofus when I finally looked into it, which I think we all do, which was around like it was 2 years later, 2014.
Yeah, I heard about it like probably 2012 or 13. It was, I remember I told you the first time I read about it was
Yeah.
on Fred Wilson's blog, right? So I just thought to myself, like, this is an insider VC thing, and they're just going to make money on the ecosystem on top of this thing, and they want all of us to buy the underlying assets so their ecosystem grows and they make money. I was just so dismissive of it, and I started to kind of understand it more. We had a customer that kept asking to pay us so we could take the payment in Bitcoin. Oh my God, that guy spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with us that year. And it's like, could you imagine I kept half of that?
When I was running a production company, I used to pay guys, the typical day rate is like $300 a day, $400 a day, something like that.
Yeah.
And in 2015, that was about the price of a Bitcoin. So I would offer guys 1 Bitcoin for 1 day's work, and they all turned me down.
Yeah.
All of them, probably 10 or 12 people. No, I don't want that.
HODL, we were getting like $20,000 to $50,000 a month from this guy, and he kept begging me for it. And he was arbitraging it. He must have been. I figured it out later, like months later.
Yeah.
He was mining it, and then he was paying us to drive traffic to his site, and then having other advertising networks. He was an arbitrage, and to pay him in fiat dollars. I don't think he ever kept any of it. Actually, my brother, my half brother, he used to mine it to pay his bills, and never kept any of it. I'm like, oh my! Back in 2013, he was doing that. It's like Jesus.
Even if you had mined it, you probably would not have kept it because it was nowadays there's so much good education around the space, like your show, and all the books that Safety and Rights, and guys like Stefan Livera and Marty Bent and Matt Odell and blah 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 blah, all the Twitter influencers. It goes on and on and on. Bitcoiners are everywhere now. They have a lot to say. They have really good advice, etc. Right? Back in like pre 2016, you just had to figure it out on your own. It was like
That's hard.
yeah, it was like being put in a room with a Rubik's Cube and being like, just figure it out, It was extremely difficult. And you'd have to go through the forum post, and you'd be listening to somebody who was like half schizophrenic, half anarchist trying to describe this thing to you. And you'd be like, this is weird, but he makes some compelling points, right? And so I would just read these crazy things and then sit around and think about it and be like, I wonder if this is going to be $100 million a coin. Seems logical,
I never thought of it like that. Yeah. Like back in the day, I just thought of it as a trade. I was just like, oh, just like people are probably doing with like NFTs and shit like that today.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I viewed it, The argument of like sound money and store of value and inflation and all these, none of that stuff was ever told to me. I didn't read about it anywhere. I'm sure it was out there, but that was not widely how it was discussed.
No, it was not. And Junsa said this thing to me that I thought was very funny and accurate. And he said, "You didn't get to Bitcoin before other people because you're quote unquote so smart. You got here because you were a young male with stupid ideas about how the government should work." And I was like, "Oh my God, you nailed me. That's exactly who I was 10 years ago."
You're that, or you're Peter McCormick if you're buying drugs.
Right. It's one of the two.
There's not many of those, actually. I think it's more people like you, actually, because it's like it gets a bad rap with the whole Silk Road thing. I don't think that was that large.
It's easier nowadays to get to the education piece, but I think because it's easier, people are less convicted in the trade. So people like me who had to do a lot of work, a lot of diligence to get here, we're deeply convicted in the trade, and you can't move us. And we set the floor, basically. We set the base, set the price. And I think we're minting more new see, this is the thing. When you talk about like Bitcoin year in review style, you say, did Bitcoin have a good year or a bad year? And as long as Bitcoin made more new hodlers, more people who are convicted in the trade, then Bitcoin had an amazing year because the hodlers set the floor,
I tell you right now, you met me a year ago, and I think you created an enormous amount of conviction for me by pointing me in the right direction to do my research and
Totally.
learning from you directly, but also reading all the books that you recommended to me and the podcasts and the white papers of different people writing. And also, it's like, I really went down the rabbit hole this year, and then I started the show, and I was interviewing a variety of different people, but it's mostly Bitcoin now, as it always happens when people get into Bitcoin, right? Everything I do is Bitcoin. So I my hat's off to you, man. Like, you definitely pushed me into the right direction, you know?
Dude, I've learned a lot from you too. It goes both ways. By the way, you know what's funny about what you just said is, have you noticed that Preston Pish doesn't do his own show anymore? He only does Bitcoin specific episodes of his show. The other stuff, he's like too bored to be bothered by it. He's like, that's boring. That's for
The
someone else.
macro finance, it's like he lets the other guys do it now. Yep.
It's so funny because I used to listen to Preston's show back in 2015, 16 as an investor, and just, I was like, this guy's really smart. And then when he started talking about Bitcoin, I was like, oh yes, he gets it. He gets it. This guy sees what's going on.
It clicks at a certain point, and you're like, what am I doing?
And then it's weird, like, 5 years later or whatever, I'm friends with the guy, and we text each other sometimes and stuff, and he's just all in on Bitcoin. I'm all in on Bitcoin. We both used to be sane, rational people who, had a balanced portfolio or whatever. We don't have one anymore.
No, yeah, we've talked. Yeah.
Like, I used to subscribe to modern portfolio theory and all that kind of stuff, and nope, not anymore. Just 100% Bitcoin.
I'm not fully on that point yet. You know that, right? We've talked about that. So I still have some stocks I don't want to sell and pay the taxes. You did get me to convert my Ethereum, which I'm pissed at. Right?
Yeah, so you would have done better.
I know. Over the time, I would have done better in Ethereum this year, but I think over time, obviously, that's not going to be the case.
Well, that's the thing. It's the don't wait to buy Bitcoin and wait, because it's like, over time, this thing is glacial. This thing, it destroys everything in its path. You know what I mean? It grinds everything down. And Bitcoin is sort of an infinite container for wealth, and the world is looking for an infinite container for wealth, right? And real estate is, been the de facto, and then equities were the de facto over the last, let's say 15 years. And just, I think both are running into their limits and their limitations. I mean, if you look at the PE ratios on most stocks in the S&P, awful, horrific. So you can't go back to a book by Ben Graham, or you can't read securities analysis and come away with the same conclusions, right, about how you should act or how you should be in the world. You should probably just invest in narratives. And honestly, if Monkey Pictures on the blockchain has a better narrative than Tesla, you should probably invest in that, right? I mean, it's all momentum-based, narrative-based investing now. It has nothing to do with underlying book value or anything like that. And so we're just living in very different times, and I think people are looking for a new store of value. And I think Bitcoin, once people start to understand Bitcoin and how, it's very difficult for people to take it away from you without leverage, and how you can store your own wealth without having to trust a third party or a financial institution. I think that gives people a feeling of empowerment, and I think they feel more convicted when they feel that feeling, because they realize that essentially they now have ownership over their own wealth, which is a pretty crazy concept. It used to be the norm, and then we lost it for a while because of trusted intermediaries, and now we're decentralizing those trusted intermediaries, right? And so you can have control over your own wealth again. And when you look at things priced in Bitcoin terms, if you go to what's Saylor's website, the strategy.com. If you go to strategy.com and you look up Bitcoin versus other assets, Bitcoin is destroying other assets in price performance. So the secret is, whether you're trading shitcoins, or you're trading equities, or you're trading real estate, or you're trading Bitcoin, if you value your gains in Bitcoin terms, if you denominate in Bitcoin terms, and you think to yourself, how many Bitcoin am I making here, rather than how many dollars am I making here? Because the dollars, they keep expanding the monetary base, so it's tough to measure with those. If you think that way to yourself, you're going to absolutely dominate in the markets. You are going to be a high level, sophisticated market participant, and it's a pretty easy hack. But once it takes people a while to come around to thinking that way, and even myself, I find myself having a hard time thinking that way, because we grew up with the dollar. So
And just so the audience who doesn't know this, and I'm sure if anybody got this far along, they're probably true Bitcoiners. But for those that are trying to figure it out, what he's saying is, I built my house back in, I think, 2014 when we constructed the house, right? It cost me 5,000 Bitcoin. If you denominate it at the cost of the construction, and you take that cost and you divide it by the price per Bitcoin, right? That's how you have to do it. For everybody listening that doesn't know this, right? Today, if I were to sell that at my house, it's probably 60 or so Bitcoins. Mm-hmm. That's what you're talking about. It's like, holy shit, I should have never built this house,
Jay could probably own 10,000 acres in Oahu or something, you know what I mean?
Right.
for the amount he spent on this house.
It's a big error. All right, last
No,
thing I want to talk about before we hop is Bitcoin lobby, right? So we have CJ, friends with CJ Wilson and Jimmy Song and others that are all on Clubhouse. Magical thing that happened on Clubhouse this year. We got to meet each other from all walks of life: professional athletes, technologists, people like Jason Williams, billionaire, and then average people as well, but also regulators, former regulators, people who are working, and they came together and they created, I think it's BTC, Bitcoin Today. What's the C stand for? I can't remember. Coalition, right?
Bitcoin
Yeah. So
Today Coalition, yeah.
yeah, it's great what they're doing, right? They're going down to DC. Talked to CJ a couple of weeks ago. He was literally in DC. Who was he hanging out with? I think Amanda, right? Cavalera. So, and they're talking to politicians like Ted Cruz and such. I'm just curious what you think of that, because I know a lot of people in the Bitcoin space, we don't need to do that kind of stuff earlier on, but I think it's necessary because it's another dynamic that will just continually disrupt the price. It's not going to kill it, but it puts roadblocks ahead in the growth and slows things down. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of lobbies that have formed. It's not just that one, and it's interesting, and I think that for a while in Bitcoin we had a joint lobby with or it wasn't even really a lobby. It's like, I don't know what you call Coin Center. It's a think tank, I guess. But we had to sort of share and do double duty with Bitcoin and shitcoin, and I think one of the things that we need to get, one of the narratives we need to get out ahead of as Bitcoiners is that Bitcoin is not going to crash the global economy, but the shitcoin bubble, if the shitcoin bubble gets large enough and it worms its way into traditional finance enough, and the things like stable coins and DeFi tokens and all that kind of stuff, if that gets big enough, like comically large, like I think the Nasdaq, what was the Nasdaq bubble in the late 90s, early 2000s? It was like 11 trillion or something like that. So like, and that's part of the .com thing. So if you had, let's say, a 30 trillion, $40 trillion bubble in shitcoins, that could be disastrous for the global economy, right? And so I think it's imperative that the people who are trying to regulate this have a clear understanding that, like, we're not with them. We don't sit at the same lunch table. They're not our friends, okay? We are doing our own thing. We believe that a lot of things that they are doing are illegal and immoral, and we would like you to do something about it, honestly. And sometimes people say, "Oh, HODL, you're not being a good libertarian." I'm not a libertarian. I'm a pragmatist. I'll say and do whatever.
That's right.
That's like real in the world, right? So I'm not interested in being ideologically pure in any regard. I'm interested in Bitcoin succeeding, and I'm interested in my personal net worth. I mean, obviously, like, as everybody is. So you know, it's going to be interesting, and I think education is a key factor, because a lot of these people, man, I listened to the congressional hearings. I don't know if you heard, like, the last one they had. It was like 4 hours long. I listened to the thing in its
I think on
entirety.
Clubhouse, you might have hosted
Yeah,
the room actually.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And we listened to it with a couple, like 300 people listening to the room on Clubhouse, and we discussed it afterwards. But some of the things that I heard were dead on. Some of the things were terrible. Some of the things were wholly incorrect. Some of the things were half true. Some of the things were just narratives. Some of the things were special interest. So it's this big morass of conflation that's going on in Congress and in the Senate and at Treasury. And I think we need to help them clarify what's happening. And I think once we've clarified what's happening for them, I don't think they have a problem in which they seek to regulate us. I think special taxes are coming for sure. Like, they're going to levy a tax on us, whether it's a wealth tax, whether it's a specific crypto tax. We're getting a specific tax. You have to render under Caesar what is Caesar's, and we're all going to have to pay our fair share. You can't get rich in America without giving up quite a bit of it back to daddy government. So that's what's going to happen, right? To the people who say, like, they're going to make it straight up illegal, like, that's never going to happen. I mean, Bitcoin is legal. It has been legal the entire time. You cannot say the same thing about the majority of the crypto space. I think the majority of things happening in crypto are straight up illegal. They're at minimum illegal securities offerings who need to register with the SEC most of the time, right? And like, we were on Clubhouse the other day, and Junseth was trying to get these kids who had an NFT project to admit that they were offering a return on investment, an expected return on investment. He's trying to get them to fail the Howey test, and they were like, "Yeah, bro, of course, yeah, we're totally offering an expected return on investment." It's like, these guys don't even know the game they're playing it. They have no idea. They don't know how the world works, right? And we were trying to educate them by also mocking them and helping them out. But I hope they got the message. But anyway, the point the point is that Bitcoin is not going to be banned in America. America is still about capital formation and it's about getting capital to flow to our shores. We have an open financial system. Yeah, we do terrible things. We sanction the world. We put people on the OFAC list. We weaponize the dollar. We weaponize our systems of surveillance. All of that stuff. Yes, that's true. But America's still probably the best place in the world. It's at least the best superpower in the world by a lot. And we want capital to continue to flow here to promote a great American century, same as the last one. And we do that by having an open financial system and by treating capital fairly. And if we do those and having strong rule of law, strong property rights. So I don't see a world in which America impinges on the property rights of its citizens anytime soon. And if we do end up in that world, God help us, because that would suck.
All right, we're going to hop before we go. What do you think we end at the end of the year this year? What do you think we're at? Do you think we get close to 100? Do you think we pass 100? Do you think it just, we had a couple days, right? So
in 22, you're talking about?
No, I'm saying right now. Like I'm saying, we got 10. What do we got? 10 days? Like not even. Like 7 days a week. What do we got?
I bet. What are we at right now? 49. I bet.
You think we get back to the high, or do you think it just kind of fizzles at the end of the year? No.
53.
You could see it through. I know we don't like TA. Everybody hates TA, but you could probably see. I haven't looked at it at all. You could look at the RSI and all this kind of stuff. Kind of figure out what's probably gonna do. I haven't even looked though.
I'll say 53. It's a lot lower than my previous predictions, unfortunately. But there's not a lot of days left in the year, so got to be realistic here with my my prediction.
I heard last night. I jumped in for like 10 minutes. I was outside in my headphones. I was listening, and Jason's like, "I think we get to 100. I see a path." I'm like, "This guy's crazy, bro. What is he talking about?" He doesn't mean it, you know.
I love that mentality of staying like permanently bullish. I'm always permanent because the thing is, I'm going to show you this. This is hilarious. I keep a bear skull on my desk. This is an actual black bear skull, and I keep it here to remind me that all bears must die. Okay. Because when you're bearish on the markets, you get to be right. This is true because bad things will always do happen in life. You're going to be right. The pessimist will always be right. But the optimists get to be rich. We get to be rich. So I'm going to keep remaining bullish for a while. You know what I mean? Can't take my bullish spirit away from me.
I love it. All right, man.
This is you.
Good show.
If you believe Bitcoin's never going to 100K, this is you. This is you. Okay? I want you to know that about yourself.
That's awesome. All right, brother. American HODL.
All right, man. It's great talking to you.